So last but not least, Cory, I'm interested in hearing a bit about you. I know when we talked earlier, as we all know, with the rampant decline of the number of farmers in Canada and thus the subsequent decrease in sort of a critical mass, can you contextualize this struggle during your NFU leadership period?
I started working on the board when I was the youth president. And it's one of the great strengths, by the way, to give a plug to ourselves again for our involvement, our tangible involvement of women and youth within our organizational structure. So to have youth represented at the board level and to do that tactician work was what I'd sort of like to focus on, because in our time we dealt with all sorts of tremendous issues. We were tear gassed for marching on WTO, and we raised the notion of farmer market power from an obscure term to something that actually became part of the common ag reporting vernacular, and we've been called practically clairvoyant when it comes to our policy analysis and how this all goes. But I want to talk more beyond the issues. And in my time when I was really on the board, a little bit different tact to the panel here is we started wrestling in a real deep and earnest way with notions of critical mass and our own capacity. And I think that that discussion is far from over. We spent a good deal of our 50 years, and we still are, and justifiably, fighting a defense against a whole slug of issues that brought that 1969 white paper to bear. Because that white paper didn't predict, it actually prescribed a reduction of 2/3 of the farm population in Canada. And many times we stood alone in picking apart the issues and showing how these policy initiatives were decimating rural communities, taking away the number of family farms off the land, all sorts of issues. And although we were justified in pursuing those, and we still are, we didn't give, throughout that 50-year history, enough time, because we certainly had the brain power, and we still do, to talk about what about Plan B? What if we lose? What is it going to look like? And we did some of that, and I think to our credit, we were just about the only farmer organization in Canada that did any amount of that. But while the farm population is shrinking, we, and our membership shrunk along with it in proportion, we were losing capacity and critical mass and the ability. Everybody loves, I mean, I was at demonstrations and still go to them with coalition members. But we as the Farmers Union are some fraction of that 1%. And of course we punch above our weight. That's been proven many times in analysis and in democratic literacy and in strategizing and tactics. We're unparalleled. But we owe it to ourselves and our mandate to be able to be realistic and find out where the pressure points are and how we can insert ourselves into these processes so that we can continue to punch above our weight and gain back a critical mass of the 1% of the population. That's the struggle that's before us. We're some fraction of 1%. We're not 1%, and certainly not the 1% that makes the news these days. We're a different 1%. We're the smarter 1%. We know this. So, I think that we owe it to ourselves to continue to have those types of discussions. So it manifested itself, this struggle that we've had. It manifested itself in our relative abilities to create tractor demonstrations, to bring people to the steps of legislatures, sure, because there's fewer farmers. So it's not the NFU's fault that there were fewer tractors on the road as the generations started to move on. I don't think that that's we don't shoulder the blame for that kind of stuff, but we still found ways, and we still can find ways of being really effective in this shrinking context. And some of it, let's be fair, some of it manifested itself with internal tensions. We have, we're not flush with money, so there's limited resources to go around. We have gone through bouts where this internal tension has threatened to tear our organization apart, and we have withstood it. We have stood strong and come out of those tumultuous times united. And that is what has given me tremendous inspiration over the years. Our ability not just to look at issues and analyze them and prescribe better policy and practice, but our abilities to organize with what meager resources we can muster, both in money and in human energy and human time. We're geniuses at this. But we have to take that role seriously, and it can't just sort of happen. It takes training, and those of you who've been around have heard some of us, like Diane and myself, speak of this before. Like, we have to train ourselves how to be the most effective citizens in all sorts of contexts, whether it's face-to-face lobby work with politicians of all political stripes, maintaining our nonpartisanism, which is another key strength of this organization, going to parliamentary committees. I have to share with you the best NFU quote of all time, I think, comes from the fellow sitting right in front here, Randall. Randall and I were in Ottawa one time, and it was a fresh new morning, and I got to Ottawa first, and he arrived after me. He said, "I don't know, Cory, what it is about Ottawa. It may be the air. I've only been in this town half an hour, and I'm starting to have stupid ideas already." And then we marched to the Hill, and we went to, I think it was a Senate committee, or maybe no, it was a House of Commons committee that time. But just how we can sort of, take our context and be effective in places like parliamentary committees. How do we filibuster our opponents? How do we participate in public meetings? We had public meetings. We were at public meetings on, I think it was Western Grain Transportation, where the NFU organized to be at a certain, to divide ourselves up among tables. And then the next day, we were filibustered, where the booklets for each table were handed out, and all the NFU people, amazingly enough, in a room full of 500 or 600 people, all the NFU people became sitting at the same table. So make no mistake, there's forces that are actively organizing against us. And once we realized how that worked, well, we put a stop to that too, and we spread ourselves out in the line, and we managed to at the following meeting, filibuster the filibuster. But this is a part of democratic literacy. It's and Randall mentioned it. It's doing whatever we can within the realm of the law and practices of the land to assert ourselves, not just in the policy discussion, but in the democratic participation context, I think. And that's my broken record spiel that people are used to hearing. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Cory. So I just wanted to go around in a sort of short conclusion to ask each of you if you could share a little bit of advice that you would give to young and new farmers who are involved with the Farmers Union, and how we can continue to be on the front lines given today's changing and frankly terrifying political and economic landscape. And Cory, to wrap it up.
I guess not too much to add. It just occurred to me when I was up here about, I guess advice I would give would also include banding together to where and whenever possible to serve specific needs. And one thing that this organization has done reasonably well, although arguably nowhere near enough of it, is some really tangible services. Whether you're creating a machinery cooperative or collective bargaining on farm inputs, or any number of things that have sort of occurred over the years. Those are very practical, sort of economically based actions, and people do this all the time through the union, and sometimes it's the union people doing it outside the auspices of the union. But those are important initiatives too. And I think that when you talk about market power, it's about sort of putting, putting wheels underneath a lot of what we believe in. And it's really practical wheels. So we may never get a wheat board back, but there are other ways to accomplish farmer market power from a grassroots level, starting farmer to farmer to farmer to farmer. And I think that when we've done it has been really, really powerful. So again, I'm a huge advocate for what I call democratic literacy. You can call it all kinds of things, but and sharing our stories. I think Gil Peterson is here, and one of the most successful things that he did in a democratic process one time was file a minority report. I don't remember the issue, Gil, but we got more traction out of a minority report. Majorities can take care of themselves, but when you sort of formalize the submission of a minority report, it gained all kinds of traction in the media. It did for a while. It drowned out the majority. I mean, so we weren't about to get our way on whatever the issue was. God, I can't remember, forgetting things. But there's ways of participating in the processes that are before us, and the training ground has always been here and now at this very convention where we work our way through our own democratic processes. So,
well said. Thank you very much.